Hi, everybody. I am starting a new series, and this time I am doing it mostly for personal reasons, but it might also interest some of you, especially if, like me, you maybe started weaving a long time ago or never had exposure to a lot of different weaving teachers. So when I started weaving in 1996, YouTube didn't exist, the internet was barely around, and I taught myself how to weave from Deb Chandler's excellent Learning to Weave book. And that was great as far as it went in terms of you're only getting one person's perspective. Every weaver, and I sound like Glinda the Good Witch at the end of The Wizard of Oz, every weaver has to learn for him or herself what works for them, what works best for them. And I also suspect that pretty much every weaving teacher in the world will tell you, yes, of course you have to play around, of course you have to experiment. There is, while there are definitely wrong ways to do stuff, there's often no one right way. So I had decided uh, early in the spring that I was going to follow along with Jane Stafford's School of Weaving, Season 2, where she actually has you weaving samples to learn different things. Bought all the yarn, got everything planned, and then my friends wanted a blanket. So I went and wove that blanket. And as you may recall, if you've heard me talk about the blanket at all, the warp was a nightmare. In all my years of weaving, I never had so much trouble with warping the loom. So that experience, as well as kind of crushing my self confidence as a weaver, made me think, yeah, I really do need to go back and start at the beginning. Start with the basics. So what I'm showing you here on Ravelry is something else. Something else I'm doing that's new. I have never been very systematic about my notes. I write them on scraps of paper. I write them in notebooks, and then I can't find them again. Or I never look back at them when I go to my next project. So, because Ravelry is convenient and easy, it's a place for me to store notes and to store photos as I go. I have chosen to start documenting my going back to basics weaving lessons on Ravelry. These pages are publicly available. I will share the link in the note in the video description, and you will not need a Ravelry subscription, which is free. You will not need a Ravelry subscription to see anything. So let's start by taking a look at this first lesson, and I am hopeful that this time documenting and photographing my progress as I go will help me help me master techniques, help me learn, help me, I don't know, remember stuff because my brain, yeah. Anywho, so my first sample is a project called Asymmetry or a lesson called Asymmetry. You can see here that I will start at least at 18 ends per inch. Jane actually reslays her reed partway through the 6 yard warp for 12 ends per inch and uses a fatter weft. You can see that this project I'm doing in 8/2 cotton warp. I've got a number of different colors. I wound 6 yard chains today of 280 ends, and I will be using a 12 dent reed to achieve my 18 ends per inch. So each video, I will add a new set of notes, or each step of my project, I will add a new set of notes, and you will always have access to them if you want to see them, if that interests you at all. Um, I'm trying to write my notes in a way that people who aren't me will still be able to understand them. You can see that I've set up some goals for myself. That for the first chain, I focused on an even tension and accurate counting, blah, 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 blah. My plans to warp from back to front. I wrote down my rationale for how I'm going to approach this warp and why I'm trying to do it that way. So, again, this is always available. You are welcome to take a look at it. You can leave comments here if you wish. You can leave comments on the video, whatever. So, my first sample in asymmetry, I am going to weave on my shacked standard floor loom because that's what I've got. And I want to talk to you now about why I've chosen to warp from back to front because it's not intuitively obvious always, especially for people who only know or have only been taught one warping style. So right now, and this is a little bit of self-promotion, this is Shack Spindle Company's website, which also features Louette products. A vociferous disclaimer: everything I tell you on this YouTube channel is my own opinion. It is not the official position of Shack or Louette, but I happen to write this stuff, and then my colleagues who actually learned weaving systematically in college go back and check. Um, these are my own opinions, but they do appear on the Shacked website. And what I'm showing you right now is a page called What Equipment Do I Need for Weaving, which you can get from anywhere on our website by looking at the Buy Looms page. And I'm on the section about how to what equipment you need for shaft loom weaving, and I'm specifically zeroed in on the section called about warping methods. So when Barry and Jan started setting up their companies and designing their looms, they sort of built in features to favor a certain warping style. In Europe at the time, 50 some years ago, back to front warping was more common. So Louette looms have all kinds of features designed to get you to uh, the pedals from the front of the loom for reasons that I'll show you in a second. And shacked looms go the exact opposite way. Barry planned for front to back warping because that was more commonly taught in the US and probably parts of Canada. So shaft looms are designed to let you get closer to the shafts from the back. So that's the loom I've got. And I'm kind of working against the grain by saying, yes, I'm going to warp my shacked loom designed for front to back warping from back to front. So what's the difference? And again, this is another aspect. This is an FAQ in the general weaving area. And it's called, What is the best way to warp my shaft loom? And of course, the answer is, it depends. But here, I've laid out the difference in the process. You notice they both start in the same place. You have to wind your warp chains with at least one cross, and they end at the same place, tying the warp on at the cloth beam, but the steps in the middle go in a different order. So, threading the reed from the cross is easy to do when you're sitting at the front of the loom. And then when you go to the back of the loom on a shaft loom and take off the rear beam, threading the heddles, you're sitting at the back of the loom. And then you tie on at the warp beam, then you beam, and then you tie on at the front. Well, warping from back to front for a variety of reasons has always worked better for my brain. It works better for counting, it works better for checking, it works better for even tension as I beam the warp. And I've talked in another video about how important it is to wind the warp evenly so that you don't have tension problems while you're weaving. So, warping back to front, you're tying on at the warp beam, then beaming the warp, and then threading the heddles from the front of the loom. And then you thread the reed again from the front of the loom. So that is a little harder to do on a shacked loom than on a Louette loom, but I have made it work before. I can make it work again. Warping, uh, warping is something that I have learned to not hate, but I want to reach a place where I love it because it is, I'm going to say at least 40% of my time, most generally my time, uh, on any weaving project is spent warping. And if I don't enjoy 40% of the process, that's kind of a problem. So I'm hoping that in my new going back to basics plan here, I will perfect techniques, make some changes, make some adjustments, try out some things so that I can learn to love warping instead of feeling like I'm fighting the warp chain or fighting my loom or whatever. So, this is my goal for at least this first, well, the whole series, but definitely for this first lesson. Many weavers, well, every weaver I know has really strong opinions about what method they use and how they do it. If you have only ever considered one style or only ever used one style, back on this, what equipment do I need? I've got some links to other people writing about why and how they do it the way they do it. And I encourage you to look at those. I also encourage you to look at the Weaving Academy, the blog on the Weaving Academy run by Tien Chu and Janet Dawson, because Janet in particular has a plethora of amazing tips for super fast winding of warp chains. And I will almost certainly never use them because they're great for winding a warp chain really fast. They would blow up my brain because they wouldn't have all the cues that help me keep track of things. And again, everybody's different. Every weaver's different. Every weaver's brain is different. Tien and Janet are production weavers. It's what they do for a living. And they are experienced enough to know that their chaining method works and does not cause them to introduce all kinds of threading or tensioning or whatever errors in their warp on the loom. I can't do it that way. So let's talk more in the next video about how I do it, and let's see how this might resonate with some of you or not.